Or are you just here?
Yes. Oh, we're here for the talk. And I will
Hi,
introduce
everyone.
ourselves.
We
Hey,
are
Alexander, I
live
think we're
now.
live.
We are live.
Hello, everyone, and
Hi.
welcome to Global XR Talks, the April 2022 edition. And our speaker today is our own Alexander Meijers. Hey, Alexander.
Hi there. Nice to see you all.
So this is our first, I think this is our first live stream from Old Space VR today. So it's very exciting. Hope everything goes well. So everyone, if you're watching from YouTube, come and join us in Old Space if you want. You can also like watch the presentation first and then join us later after the talk. Alexander, yeah. Well, usually we start with some news, right? In the beginning of this.
That is correct, and I will leave that for today up to you.
Oh, no pressure. Okay, let me think. What new thing today? Well, yesterday there was a showcase from Meta, of course, the gaming showcase. I don't know if anyone of you has seen it. I guess a few of you have. It's fun. It's like half an hour where they showed all kinds of new this year. My personal favorite was Moss 2. I'm really looking forward to that one. There, you know, where you play the little mouse and have to solve all kinds of riddles. Really cool. What else? Among Us VR. That's also going to be a lot of fun. All kinds of shooter games, which is not my thing so much, so I don't remember the titles, but they look really impressive. And then they finished with Ghostbusters VR, so that's going to come. It looked really fun, you know.
Oh.
Meet Slimer in VR. So that was really nice to see yesterday.
I watched the latest Ghostbusters this weekend. It has nothing to do with XR, but it is definitely one you need to watch.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet actually. So yeah, maybe the game is a tie-in to that one. I don't actually know. It's very like classic Ghostbustery. Well, it's really fun. What else? Oh yeah, I got to try a headset that I hadn't tried before last week from Vario, XR3. That's called, which was really cool because like the Vario headset, they all have those like really high resolution displays. With like a little focus display in the middle that's even has like higher resolution than the rest. And the last time I tried that, like 3 years ago, you could really notice the where it went from the high resolution to the lower resolution outer display. And with the new one, that really wasn't the case. It's like just didn't notice. It was really cool for the XR3. And the second thing was the pass-through camera. Like has like I think 12 megapixel, like really high resolution pass-through camera, where you can actually see your surroundings, like the real world. Like almost no distortion. Like the only distortion I noticed were like my hands were a little bit close to me, but everything else looked really great. So that's quite a development for VR, or it's like almost mixed reality, you could say, sets. It's also really cool to try. I mean, it's really also a really expensive headset. So like I don't know how much, 3,000 euros at least, between 3 and 6. Don't remember, fortunately, but it's like really high end, really enterprise focused, but really cool to see. Yeah, in general, I'm really excited for like events to start up again because I really missed this like trying headsets the last 2 years. We were all to stay home, so I hope that's going to change again this year.
Yeah, I agree with that because it's definitely this year needs to be the year where we're getting new and newer headsets from different organizations and companies. And I think it's good to have that because I'm really interested in the next version of Oculus actually, because that has the pass through with color, and that actually brings mixed reality and augmented reality together with virtual reality, which makes it just one big cool thing.
Exactly, and then maybe even more affordable than the Vario one. You know, the Vario headset. Which also already does color, but it's like, you know, not exactly affordable for everyday consumers. Well, I've talked a lot. Shall we just start your presentation?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone. My name is Alexander Meijers, and I'm going to do an introduction to Microsoft Remote Assistant, Microsoft Guides. So it is
Yay.
first-party
Very
apps.
exciting. Okay, I'm going to leave the stage to you. I'm Saskia Groenewegen, by the way. I think I forgot to say that. And have fun with Alexander's talk. And see you afterwards.
Okay.
Bye.
So talking about Remote Assistant Microsoft Guides. Now to give a bit about myself, my name is Alexander Meijers. I'm a global XR technology lead and a metaverse evangelist working at Avanade. And I'm actually also board member and founder of the Global XR community, and I'm an MVP for mixed reality with Microsoft. So it makes a bit of sense that these are the subject I'm going to talk about. Now, to start first a bit about what is now mixed reality and what's extended reality. If we look at the current, this is actually 1 year old from a Harvard review. Already 87% of companies were exploring or piloting mixed reality. I will get back to the point what actually the differences are. But the fact that organizations are already spending one or 2 years ago this amount on time, imagine now 1 year later, all the technologies we have, how this business is growing. Now, to explain a bit because I always talk about XR and not about the other ones because it makes it very unclear. So let me explain that. So you all know virtual reality probably because you're now wearing a headset and you're in all space VR and enjoying this session. So virtual reality means being immersed in a complete world. When we talk about augmented reality, we're actually talking about having a actual physical world where is a digital content overlaid. So think about looking at a house and getting information about that house in a digital way. When we talk about mixed reality, we're actually talking about the fact that I now can, instead of doing an overlay, put that information connected to an actual physical asset. So I could have a machine and around that machine build with digital content, a training or a process support, which is actually one of those apps. Now, all of that is what we actually call extended reality. Now, it goes a bit further because when I'm talking about extended reality, it's way more than those three things. It's about devices. Think about Connect for Azure, which is a 3D camera system. The HoloLens, which is a very important part for these two apps, which I'm going to talk a bit more about. Virtual reality headsets, mobile devices like your mobile phone. But also think about the modern workplace, where you have the 3D integration in Office, where Mesh for Teams is coming hopefully this year. We don't know yet. We have the first-party apps. Those I can talk a bit later on. You have mixed reality services. So think about location-based content using spatial anchors or mapping content on top of an actual object by using spatial objects. Think about rendering large models with lots of details by using remote rendering technologies. Of course, Microsoft Mesh, which is coming up. But it goes further even. It's also about blending solutions, how to bring everything together. And at that part, it suddenly starts to become really interesting because XR is then way more than only those three things I just mentioned. It's also about integrating the platforms on Dynamics, on using digital twins. Now, as we know, digital twins is going to be the main driver when we talk about metaverse, for example, because we're actually replicating the actual environment and allowing you to play around in that. So it's a lot together. And to be honest, when building, let's say, custom solutions using HoloLens, it's mostly 40% building the solution on HoloLens, while it is actually 60-70% building the whole integration behind it. Now, this is I'm going to stay very short on this one, but this gives us an idea of what is going on when we talk about the XR space within Microsoft. It's about the tools you can use, the products that they are. And the cool thing with Microsoft is that, and I know it's not always, cool, but this actually makes it cooler. All the things you have in Office 65, everything you have in Azure, you have around devices are really easy being connectable. And that is a big advantage because you're now able to build solutions and to bring everything together and just leverage from every part of that platform, of that space, the technology. Now, when we look at landscape, it's about your mobile devices, like your mobile phone or a tablet. When we talk about virtual realities, of course, the headsets. And when we talk about mixed reality, we're talking about HoloLens 2 at the moment and the Kinect for Azure. Now, HoloLens 2 is a very important one when it comes to the remote assist and guides, and that will be more clear later. Now, for the people who don't know what's HoloLens 2, HoloLens 2 is a device. It's a mixed reality or an augmented reality device, which is able to show holograms in front of you with a specific technique where they actually are projecting the holograms through glasses. Now, the device itself is a full-blown computer. You don't need a PC to connect to it. It can actually work completely without any computer connect to it. It supports things like natural gestures, able to touch holograms, to move. It supports voice understanding. It has eye tracking. It's even able to automatically based on iris scan. And there is way more in the device. Now, the device itself runs on a specific version of Windows 10. Means that you can build your own solutions on Windows 10 and let them run on an HoloLens. Now, for this session today, my focus will be mainly on remote assistant guides. Now, another thing, and this is a really important thing when we talk about mixed reality and specifically for the device, is that it understands the environment. It uses several cameras and a depth camera together to create a duplicate, or let's say a digital twin of your environment, and it will update that environment continuously. And that way, it is able to position an hologram in that space and connect it to that space, meaning that I can put an hologram on the table and walk around the hologram, and I can still actually see the background. The device so incredibly cool, and the fact that what you all can do. Now, Microsoft has two apps which you can use, which you don't have to do anything. You have to do less to actually use them. It's two already existing apps in the store, which allows you, which are for two different things. One is called Remote Assist, which enables you to get help from an expert, and that expert can actually look over your shoulder and use annotations. I will go more in depth with what everything is there. And the second product they have is Guides. And Guides is a way of doing step-by-step instruction training or process support. Now, they are working on more apps, but these two are the most important one. And of course, as I said, you can develop your own apps. You don't have to stay with these two. But these two are really interesting, and I'm going to explain why. Now, let's start with Remote Assist. Now, Remote Assist is meant to be, is a way of allowing me to really get the help from an expert when I'm in a remote location. And you can actually use Remote Assist on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, iOS or Android, doesn't matter which. Or when you need both of your hands, you can actually use an HoloLens. Now, it can connect to Dynamics 365 field services, which allows you to do things like capture, asset capturing. I'm going to show them a demo from that one. And this is a really interesting one. It also allows you then to integrate it with the Power Platform. And I will get back to that part to explain a bit more how that works. Now, so to explain a bit, the idea is very simple. There is an issue identified. The first line worker is called upon to resolve the issue. She goes to the location, she tries to solve the problem there herself. Now, it seems that the lock is still on, she doesn't get it solved. So the next thing she does is uses her mobile phone, which you can see in the middle. She calling someone else who is actually on Teams, Microsoft Teams. That person now looks through her camera, and that person can actually make annotations on the screen and show her which of the buttons she needs to press to solve the issue. Now, in this case, the issue is a bit more difficult, and she needs to do some work on some diagram stuff. So she puts on the HoloLens, and in this case, she does the same thing. She starts up the app connects to Microsoft Teams, again to the same expert. Now the expert is shown within the space, and now the expert can again show her what she needs to do. But the expert can also now share, for example, a document, which could be a wire diagram to explain a bit more on what she needs to do, as she's now doing. So she's actually now sharing a diagram of what she needs to do, and she needs both hands to do the work. Now, this is what remote assist primarily is supposed to be used for, but it is way more than that. Now, to make it a bit more clear, I have this slide which explains the different ways of how to do remote assist. Now, one of those is that you use it as a standalone product, which means you have video audio calling, it's video annotations, you can share documents or pictures, and you have the ability to record. And think cases like collaborative maintenance or repair, process support, knowledge sharing, etc. Now, what you can do now is you can actually extend remote assist by using what we call tenant features. And what we mean by that is that within your Office 365 tenants, where you're actually using as a user remote assist in, you can set up an environment, and that environment suddenly gives you two more interesting functionalities. One-time call and the call dashboard. Now, I will explain those things later, but one is for insights on how your calls are processing, and one is used for a support engineer use case. But I will have a demo later for that. The version is extending it to Dynamics. In that case, you're actually extending it to Dynamics field services. And that allows you to connect your recording or your call to a specific work order or to bookings. It also allows you to do asset capturing. Now, and the last one, and this is a really interesting one, is that you can actually extend, because now comes the call dashboard uses the Microsoft Dataverse, which is the underlying database, which is also used by Power Apps and Power Platform, to store every call which is done within Microsoft Assist. Now imagine that you're triggering a flow when a new record is added because someone did a call, and that you're actually sending out an email, or you're collecting the data during that call and then put it in another system. And that suddenly allows you to do way more than that. Now, let's go a bit further. So again, what I said, remote assist works together with Teams. So we can have multiple devices connecting to each other in the same call. But in most cases, you're using experts who are using Teams. That means that the person who's using Teams does only require a Teams license, and the person who's using the remote assist app on a mobile device or HoloLens requires an actual remote assist license. Now, there are three ways to do things. That is one-to-one calling, which means between two participants. I'm just calling one expert helping me out. The second one is doing a group call, and it can be up to 50 participants. And a group call can be really interesting when you, for example, want to do a trainee scenario where your trainees are calling into Teams, and as the trainer, you're using remote assist to show some of the things you're doing around an actual object. Meeting is a way of scheduling, and that can be actually be used, for example, let's say that you want to perform a compliancy check where you have multiple important people who needs to do the validation check on an actual asset based on compliance regulations. And then you schedule a meeting with those people and you will participate in that meeting. Now, we already talked about this. You can do annotations and snapshots. There's not so many possibilities, but I don't think it's actually needed because you only need to do simple arrows and stuff. So you have arrows, you have the ability to do an ink tool, you can then do and erase everything. And annotations you do are seen by everyone. So all the people doing that through Teams can actually be seen by you. Now, annotations require spatial tracking. Now, on a HoloLens, that's not a problem since we're using multiple cameras to understand the environment. But when you have mobile devices, you actually need to use AR capabilities of that. That means that you need to move your mobile phone or tablet a bit around so that it understands the environment. And at that moment, it suddenly allows you to start doing those annotations. Now, this is a demo where I'm actually connecting with a mobile phone. Now, on the right, you see me using the remote assist app on a mobile phone. On the left, you see an expert who's logged in. So I'm Paul Rudd on the mobile phone. I'm Spencer Lowe with my expert. So the expert is in Teams. And what I do is I'm going to call Spencer Lowe in remote assist. And you will notice that within the Teams call that Paul Rudd is calling, which is good. So open the session. And Paul Rudd, who is the expert, will now see what I'm seeing using my mobile phone. Now you will notice on the right that my mobile phone is still looking at the tracking. And then suddenly, when it has been moved a bit around, you will notice that the tracking issue is solved. And now I'm suddenly able to do start thing. Now, the cool thing with this is that I can do annotations, I can do a recording, I can take pictures, I can do a lot of things. But the cool thing is that the person, the expert in Teams, can also do the same thing. So that person can actually say start editing, what you see on the left. And then when you say start editing, it will freeze the screen that allows that person to actually start making an annotation. Now, in this example, you will see me doing on the right the annotation myself. Now, I will move a bit further, and you actually see that for the expert also. Now, the next demo I have is doing actually the same thing, but in this case, I'm now using a HoloLens 2. So again, I have Spencer Lowe, who's the expert, and I'm actually very small visible in the right corner. So that's not me live, because otherwise it would not work. This is a small recording to actually show it. So at some point, I will put on my HoloLens. Hopefully I'm going to do that. And let me start at the remote assist. And then I'm going to, but I can't show you when I'm doing that. So when I'm calling, so I'm putting on the HoloLens, starting up the app, and I'm going to call Spencer Lowe in Teams, who is now on this computer. So we will see, hopefully, a call coming in from Paul Rudd. And funny enough, you can see how many times I have been playing around with that, because you see all the missed calls or all the incoming calls from the last day at that time. So on the HoloLens, I'm now opening it. You see the call coming in. So this is, what you're now going to see is what actually Spencer Lowe sees. So Spencer Lowe is now looking through my HoloLens, and he will actually see also the screens which are open within the HoloLens. I can move the screens around, and I can do now both things. So one, I can make my own annotations again, and again, Spencer Lowe can do that also by pressing the start editing. And when he does, it will freeze the screen, and it will give him the ability to make some annotations and then stop freezing the screen. So we will wait this one. So this is me doing it on the HoloLens. So I'm explaining to Spencer Lowe, we need to fix that issue on one of the parts. And now you see Spencer Lowe doing it. So Spencer Lowe says start editing. It freezes the screen. He places it in there, and then he says stop editing. Sorry for an extra row. Now you see that I, through the HoloLens, actually see the arrows placed by him. So he actually is able to pinpoint what I need to do. Now, let's say that you're using mobile device, but you're using an old mobile device which does not support AR capabilities. And still Dynamics Remote Assist can be used. And what it actually does is it creates in-call snapshots for the 2D annotations, which allows you to do the annotations, and then it will bring those annotations into the system. Now, it's also possible, if the connection is that bad, that you're going to start sending text messages. So it actually works with 1.5 megabit connection. It needs actually 5 megabit. I have seen it working with video and audio on 300 kilobit. But it could happen that your connection is losing or you're difficult to hear because you're in a noisy environment. And in that case, you can actually use text messages to support it. Now, we also talked about files and stuff. Now, one thing I want to show is another demo. Let's say that we connected to Dynamics Field Services. And as soon as I do that, I get the option to do asset capturing. Now, asset capturing is a way of doing, let's say, it's capturing information around an asset, like pictures or text or recording, and then connect that to, let's say, a work order in Field Services. Now, the cool thing is that this can actually be done without an online connection, meaning you can be in an offline situation, doing the capturing, and then later on, when you connect again to the system, it will actually understand that and it will broadcast all the data. Now, let me give you an example. So what I'm now doing is I'm selecting the assets. So in this case, it's probably the switch box. And for the switch box, I'm going to take, I think I'm going to take a picture in this demo, if I'm right. Let's see if it's going to happen. Because you see the switch box on the right. Yeah, I'm going to take a picture. And I'm taking a picture there. The picture can contain annotations. So that would be possible. Those will be also recorded on the picture. And those pictures will now be stored against that asset. Meaning that if I now go into Dynamics Field Services, I can actually see the information I recorded to do this session. Now, another thing which is possible is doing group calls on Remote Assist. And that means that you can have multiple participants taking part of a group call. That can be on multiple devices, like mobile devices, but it could also be on multiple HoloLens devices. And the reason for that, and that's a really interesting one, is imagine now that I need to fix something on an engine, and that is a bit difficult because I need to have an engineer on another location with the same engine. Then it would not be logical to call the expert in the office. What I then can do is I want to call the expert which is on another facility with the same engine or the same machine. Now he's also wearing his HoloLens, and now you can actually mix together what you're seeing and getting things explained. Now that is the same as this one, so I will skip that one. Now, the last two things I want to talk about Remote Assist is one-time call. Now one-time call is a really interesting one. Now what normally would happen is that if I do a normal Remote Assist call, then the person using Remote Assist is paying the license and he's calling someone on Teams, which only pays a Teams license. Now let's say that I have a business-to-business scenario where I need, or business-to-consumer scenario, where I need, for example, to able to support my clients, which are consumers. You can't expect from a consumer that they're going to buy a Remote Assist license. It would also be ridiculous to buy of your consumers a license. So there comes one-time call. And what one-time call is, it creates a one-time link for a support engineer. That one-time link can be sent over. And then the consumer, in this case, can use that one-time link to open Remote Assist and do a one-time Remote Assist call together with the support engineer. The person who needs a license is the support engineer. Now, and how that looks like is as follows. So in this case, we have a support engineer. Let me start that. So the support engineer is talking to a client, and the client has a problem with his espresso machine. So can you have a mixed reality video call? Which is a bit weird question because I don't think your consumer will know what a mixed reality video call is. But what he means is he wants to do a call where he can share the video. So what he now does is he goes into the one-time call technology. He generates a link, he copies that link, and he sends that to his clients. Now the client can link, and by clicking on that link, the Remote Assist app is installed first time if it's not on the device, and if it's installed with Remote Assist. Now the client is showing his espresso machine, and now engineer supporting explain how to remove the back of the machine and how to replace a certain part. The cool thing with this is that only support engineers required to have the license, and they can support their consumers using Remote Assist. Now the last thing, which is an interesting one, is call dashboard. And this call dashboard, so if you connect your Remote Assist app to the tenant, to the tenant environment, you will be able to record all your calls. And what I mean by record is not that it records the audio video. What it means is that it will register the call. So it will actually, if you do a call, it will register the start time of the call, the end time of the call, and the call duration, and some other information. Who did the call? Where was the call done? And all that information is being used to create a record. Now, what is cool about this is Remote Assist itself cannot be extended because you can't change anything. But since this data is stored in Microsoft Dataverse, it now allows you to use like Flow or Power Apps to do something with that data, to play around with it. So, make a bit higher. When it lower, it will degrade. The second product I want to explain about is Microsoft 365 Guides, and this is a really cool application for Microsoft. What it actually does is it allows you to do step-by-step instruction to support processes, to support training. Now, how does it work? Now, normally would someone go, it's a bit of the old way, to a company, that person gets a lot of training, and and it's often an overwhelming amount of information you get to actually do the work. Now, that can be done different. So what happens is that we have a manager who is going to create the training. And what it does is they use a PC app for guides, and they start creating each of the steps. So they're creating each of the steps of the instructions. And by each of the steps and instructions, they can put 3D models to support it, like arrows or other objects, or even under supporting videos or images. Now, when it's done, that same manager now puts on the HoloLens, open the same just made training, and start putting each of those steps on an actual asset in this case. It can also be on virtual, I'll explain it later. And creates the training on the actual asset. Now, the third thing is that the manager now assigns the task, in this case, to the employee. And the employee starts the same app in what we call operator mode. And now she gets explained step by step what she needs to do. So in this case, get an item, place it over there. It explains by questions and movements in what she needs to do, how she needs to lever something, how it needs something to be turned and to put on the device. Now, during the guides, the information is actually collected and also stored in the Dataverse again, and can be used to use analytics on that. And in this case, it's not being used to monitor your people. It is used to understand how the guide has been operating, and if you can optimize the guide by improving some of the steps, because some of the steps took longer than needed. Now, there are benefits by using Microsoft Guides. And as I said, it's just like Remote Assist. It's an application which you can't extend in any way. It's just an application you run on your Windows computer to create the first step, and you have the application on a HoloLens to finalize your steps and to execute the guides. You have the ability to import photos, videos. You can use custom 3D models. There is a large set of 3D models already available to support things like arrows, hands. You can change the texture or the material of an hologram to indicate something is, let's say, important or is dangerous because you're not allowed to touch it, etc. All training, all guides, information is stored in the CDS, which is nowadays called Microsoft Dataverse. And you can, and this is cool, extend guides by extending the Dataverse. And I will have an example at the end of the presentation about that. Now, the cool thing with guides is that it's not doing like copycatting what someone does. It is supporting, for example, step-by-step processes. But it could also be used to actually train people to understand what they need to do, to actually assemble an engine or a machine, or how to operate a certain machine in a factory. But imagine, let's say you want to do, you need to do an inspection on a certain machine, but that inspection only takes place once a year. Then to understand and to remember the steps you need to do the inspection can be sometimes difficult. And by using a guide, you can actually support that process. Now, with a real asset, or we're doing it actually on a virtual asset, as you see in the right. And in the right, that was one of my old examples where I was using a turbo engine for my airplane, which of course I don't have laying around at home. So then using a virtual asset would be interesting. Now, the advantage of having a virtual asset could be that you don't have the machine, don't have the item you need to do. It could also be the reason that you're not able to access the location where you need to operate on the actual asset because you're not trained well enough, or that location is not really accessible. So there are different ways of choosing for virtual assets or real life assets. Now, in this case, I have we call a Seika MVSA 525 machine. It's a blood pressure machine that also can measure temperature. And you will notice that this is the part when we do an introduction on what the machine can do, how it works. We can have some explanations, as you see here. I'm sharing the video about the machine itself. Now, what if I want to do a bit like a medical training? So I can actually create a step where I have choices, and that choice can move to another step. So I can go to a factory in a step. And in this case, I'm training a person, explaining that the basket can be removed from the device, or to show, for example, an exploded view of the device. So see every part of it separate. Now, the reason why I did a virtual asset in this case is that I didn't have the device, and that it also allows someone to train on the device while not having it in your possession or not being in the hospital. Now, the cool thing with this is that if I want to do now, let's say, I want to go further, can you actually interact with a virtual asset, with an actual asset? And that's actually possible. And in the knowledge test, that is an example. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to use space figures. And what it means is, in this case, I need to identify what the thermometer, the temperature measurement device is. And the spatial trigger allows me that if I put hands in a certain space, like what I'm now doing, it will trigger the next step. And I'm using another texture on the device and show how and where it needs to be connected. Now, on a virtual device, this is really great because it allows you really easy to create a training. But as you can, if you do this on a aspect. It could be, for example, that you need to remove, let's say, and then when you move into the bolt area, it will actually show the next step and explain how to loosen that bolt to remove it. So you can active guide. Now, again, with Dynamics 365 guides, just like Remote Assist, there are different ways of doing this. One is doing the standard way, where you just have the guides application, the authoring app, and the guides environment, where you just create step-by-step instructions. The second step, already discussed it a bit, is extending it by leveraging the data you're collecting about executed guides. The third one, and that one is a really interesting one, is extending the product. And the cool thing with guides is that it does not only store the analytics data of guides, it also stores all the guides itself. So you actually can trigger based on the step you're in or when a guide is being created. And that means that you could, for example, build what we call good manufacturing and good practice around guides, which means guides itself does not have things like auditing or versioning in there. You don't want to build that. I can actually use Power App and Power Platform to do that and build a dynamic system around it just by leveraging that data-first database. Now, a new option, which is currently in public preview, is the ability to do a call within guides. And this is really cool because it means that when I'm operating a guide and I have a question or the step I need to do is complex or it is even dangerous, it allows me to call someone and to collaborative work together to solve that problem and go to the step-by-step instructions. Now, at the moment, that's only limited to one-to-one calling. And for people who think it feels a bit like Remote Assist, it's not the same. It uses the same technique, but it is specifically within guides. So in the old way, you're able to start up a Remote Assist call and then just go into, then exit Remote Assist without leaving the call, and then start up guides. You could do the same. But now you can just do it within Dynamics 365 guides itself, meaning you don't need the Remote Assist license anymore. You can just do it within the guides license. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, that's the last thing for this one, is how can you extend Microsoft Guides? I already explained it a bit. That's leveraging the data first. And I want to explain a bit how that could work. Now, let's say you want to use real-time information with augmented training. So let's say we have this machine, and this machine generates IoT based on some IoT sensors. Now, the data of those IoT sensors is then brought into an IoT hub, and we can use asset binding to bring that into Dynamics Field Services, or store that in the Dataverse, or connecting that to Azure Storage. Now, what I then can do is I can actually create, so I have the Microsoft application, I can create a Power App. That Power App can be started in Microsoft Guides. And that Power App can now leverage that data real time, showing me. Now, that could be that within a certain step, I want to see what the temperature is doing because I need to know if it's still too hot to touch. It could be that I need to know if a lever has been turned on or off, and that the IoT data tells me that before I move to the next step. So this is an example where you actually integrate the Power App in combined with IoT data. But as I explained, you can go further. You can create the good manufacturing practice, or the good X practice, as we call that, to build auditing and versioning around it. You could think about, let's say, gamification in a room using guides. So there are many ways of extending guides itself. Now, this was the introduction, an intro to Remote Assistant guides. There is way more information to talk about these applications. This is just a very high overview. Hopefully, this has given some insights of what the two products of Microsoft are doing within the mixed reality or extended reality space. And yeah, it's open for discussion of questions. However, and this is a bit more difficult, we are in Old Space VR, so the people are now within the YouTube session. And I have to check with my colleague Saskia. Are you able to see if they had questions in there, or
I am.
because I can't see that I'm in Old Space?
So Alexander, first, thank you so much for your talk. Very interesting overview of our guides and remote assist. We do not have any questions on YouTube, unfortunately, right now. If anyone has a question, please just post it in the YouTube chat, Alexander, and then we'll relay it. Very interesting. So to extend guides, basically you can open any Power App from inside of guides. Is that what you said? Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that is correct. So what you can do, and you have to understand, it's loosely coupled. It means you can open a Power App based on a URL on each of the steps. So each step can actually contain another Power App URL. It could be one in step one and then just keep it open in the other steps. Now, the point is, and I'm calling it loosely coupled, is that it doesn't get the information like in which step you are. But you can imagine that that could be a parameter within the string you give to the Power App. Tell you are now in step 2. That's one way. The other way could be that to the background, because when I'm executing a guide as an operator, it is actually storing the data in the Dataverse, meaning I would know in which step I am based on the person using the device. But I would probably more look into the direction of use case scenarios where you want to show certain information which belongs to that step and to make the execution of that step more easily.
Yeah. And is the extending guides limited to Power Apps, or like open other websites, or like start Outlook or something like that?
There is an option to open a URL purely outside, which could be, let's say, Outlook, Outlook in the web browser. That would be possible. So that would be an option. But yeah, that for is it at the moment. And maybe explain a bit. The product team at Microsoft, who is building guides, are very they are very proactive in listening to the people to understand new functionality or features and to take it. But they're also every 3 months, besides fixing, of course, the standard things, they're almost every 3 months releasing some new functionality in guides. And it's also done within Remote Assist. In Remote Assist, it happens a bit less. The reason for that is that Remote Assist is connected to Teams, and the impact of changing things within Remote Assist will influence a lot in the background. So the process of putting changes through will take way more time. But Guides releases almost every 3 months new functionality.
Oh, really cool. Do you have any idea what the next functionality is going to be? It's going to be added?
I actually know.
Is it like a public roadmap?
There is a public roadmap, which for example, the public preview of the call functionality in there, which is gonna, I think it's gonna, this is from top of my head, but I need to look at the road. You can just find that one online. I think it's gonna be released in October version, if I'm right, as the actual release. But it could change, you need to check that. But they also work things which are still under private preview. And those things are not yet on the roadmap mentioned, or you can take it from something, but yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think like the problems that Remote Assist and Guide solve, of course, were common use cases, right? For really good use cases for the HoloLens. something that the HoloLens has been used for like almost from the start, I could say.
Yeah, and funny enough, if you look at how it has been evolving, I mean, specifically guides. I know guides already for 2-3 years, actually for 3 years almost. And if you look at version 1 till what has now been in the product, and they even begin at the end of last year, they changed the whole UI interface, which looks incredibly, which supports the touch capabilities of HoloLens too. It is a so mature product, which enables you in so many ways, and there are so many scenarios where you can actually use this for. And while I understand that if you talk about return of investments when you implement remote assist, it's rather easy. It's about people don't have to travel anymore, so that's easy being calculated. But
yeah, I remember there was this Forrester report recently, like Microsoft did this whole study with Forrester on the how much money do you save by using remote assist for engineers.
Correct. Yeah, and for guides it's a bit more difficult to calculate, but it is mostly the fact that an expert doesn't have to be on site with you, that you don't have to reserve an actual environment because you're practicing on a virtual asset. And if you count all those costs together, it can be a large return of investment by just using this kind of technology.
Maybe say you have a motor or some kind of machinery, you want to add guides to it, or you add guides to it, like steps and instructions, and everything connected to this real object. Do you know how the HoloLens recognizes the real object? Like, are they using like object anchors underneath, or is it just the mesh of the room? Like, what I want to go towards is like, say you move the object to another room, will guides still work, or does it have to stay in place?
That's a very good question. Something I didn't touch in this interview because it's a part where you can actually talk about almost an hour about. But in principle, when you use guides, it works with a QR code, or it's not really it's a code. It's like a recognizable code on paper. Let's call it a QR code. And that's one way to do it. It means that the thing you're doing the guides on needs to be static. So if it moves and moving around, it will be more difficult because then you have to reset.
If it's a QR code and you're not actually like recognizing the object or anything, what wouldn't it be?
No, that's one. So you can use the QR code thing asset. You can actually put it on the asset itself, or you can put it somewhere in the room where it is located. The other way you can do this is, and this is really great, they are actually leveraging spatial object anchoring technology from Azure. And it allows you to recognize...
Spatial anchors? Object anchors. You know which
object
one?
anchors. Object anchors is the one. And they're leveraging that technology to recognize the object, and then put the guide and sync the guide to that recognized object. There is one thing.
Object anchors is the one where you use like a 3D model of the object, right?
Yes,
to recognize the real object.
Yeah, and the advantage of that is that object anchoring works very well, and means that you can really do very precise ways of recognizing the object. Disadvantage is that object anchoring requires the actual 3D model or the representation of the actual asset. And in some cases, you don't have, and it needs at least 1 by 1 by 1 meter to work well. That has to do with the limitations of object anchoring within Azure.
Yeah, I can imagine also the meshes to course, or...
Yeah. And the third way to do this, but that's the most used way, to put it like that, is that you, when you start a guide, you're positioning the 3D object on top of the actual object. Because you're positioning it yourself, which is a bit tricky because if you don't position it well, the guide will be out of sync. and then start the guide. But in most cases, the code or object anchoring is used. And one additional thing, you don't need to pay additional money to actually use the object anchoring. It is part of the solution. It is part of paying this license for guides.
Yeah, which is something like 35 euros per month per user.
Yeah, so both products can be, so what you do is, in both cases, within your Office 365 fund, meaning you need to bind a license, just like an Office license, to your account. You have a remote assist license, or multiple versions actually you have, but the two major are remote assist and guides. And from the top of my head, price standard is around 60 or 65 euros per month.
For both of them together,
cheaper,
right?
when you do. That's per license. So that means remote assist pay, and you need to pay guides if you want to use both products. And you have.
I saw something was more like 30 something euros. But
yeah, so this is a bit tricky because it really depends on what kind of licensing model you have with Microsoft.
Yeah.
Because that can actually influence the price you get
that's a whole other
based on
topic.
what you want to use. Yeah, let's don't get into that direction. But if people want to start with this in their organization, and you need to know the license cost, you can check that in your tenant. And I would also connect with your peer at Microsoft on the sales side, and they can help you further to get the right pricing on the licensing.
And I think you get like the first 90 days, you can just try it out for free.
Yes. Since that actually is a 90-day trial, you have to be a bit aware with that one, because when you start a remote assist and you're usually doing it from a company, the 90-day trial is actually based on a Microsoft account, which means that you're not using, it's actually creating from your tenant account a Microsoft account, and then using that account for 90 days as a trial license. It is also possible within your Office 365 tenant to start a trial license, which is an actual trial license, which is actually what you require when you do it at organizational level. That license is only for 30 days. That means both for guides and for remote assist. The only thing I can tell you is that if you have a good argument, and you again talk with your peer at Microsoft, it could be extended. But that's something has to be decided by Microsoft. But it's only extended once, and after that you need to pay for the licenses.
Oh, interesting. I have no more questions, I think. Anything else you wanna tell? Anything else that wasn't in your presentation and maybe it's interesting?
No, yeah, the one thing I want to finish with is that and I think that is the direction where it's, so there are two things which are really interesting. One is, from an enterprise perspective for me, extending the products by leveraging the data first information by using Power Apps, Power Flow with Power Platform is a very interesting one, because it allows me to build rich solutions for clients. And another thing which is a really important one is, but I didn't include it in the presentation because it makes it too complicated, is that when you in enterprise organizations start to roll out these applications and you're using HoloLens devices, you're often getting to the point that you need to have those devices being managed. And that is a complete other topic. You can actually fill hours of work with that. But it's definitely an important one because it's not as simple as it is a bit comparable by doing mobile devices, bringing them under MDM. Mm. And what is an interesting part of that process is that in principle, you have Windows Autopilot for mobile and for desktop. And you nowadays have that also for HoloLens too. And what Autopilot does is that when you, let's say, when you have it running on the Autopilot, it means that if you reset the HoloLens and you go to the first steps of the initialization, and to the point when you connect to a Wi-Fi. After that, it's going to look for that profile, and if it finds the profile, to actually start to provision your device, completely automatic with all the apps and stuff you need. Now, within enterprise organizations, this is a really important one, because let's say that you lend out your devices to people, and you need to make sure that they are cleaned with all the information on that one. The best way is just to reset the device, but that means that you also have to bring it again under NDM. You have to install all the apps, and Autopilot in this case will help you out and will solve that issue for you.
That's a really good point. Yeah, if you want to switch users.
Yes.
Awesome.
But it was a bit
so
too complicated to explain in the introduction.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for this really interesting talk, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. And I think that's it from us for today.
Okay. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully it was an interesting session for people.
Yes, and we'll see you next month for the next Global XR Talk. Bye.
Bye-bye.